Hey guys, welcome to the Silver Report Uncut. So I wanted to go over this data that came out from Deloitte and the Bureau of Labor Statistics in an attempt to determine the shape of the recovery. They found not only did they not see a V-shaped recovery in 2021, but according to current economic data, it's more than likely a U-shaped recovery that extends into 2023. Now there's several reasons for this, and they said there's still a lot of factors in play. And they added that in 2 months, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, they estimated that the economy lost more than 20 million jobs in March and April. That would be 1/7 of the total number employed in February. Sectors like entertainment, arts, recreational services, they were down 55%. Accommodation and food services, it was down 47%. These were the hardest hit. All private sector industries, they saw job losses, and it's not like it was a one-time event just because of the sickness. We're seeing waves and waves of job losses still coming through. Now they anticipate we're likely to see even more recessionary type behavior, that this isn't just a supernova that's going to flare up and dissipate and everything's just fine once again. That was just the initial impact and the shock wave is coming. So Deloitte said the driver of the downturn is consumer spending. And they added that their forecast for near-term consumption is based on an evaluation of consumer spending by detailed sector, and that yields a substantial decline in GDP. Now, some of the problems are that just two key categories of consumer spending, they account for 8% of GDP in the US. Those two categories are food services and accommodations and recreation services. So it's likely there's no V-shaped recovery in this area. We're still seeing more businesses shutting down. We're still seeing more job losses in the food services and accommodations area. Now another trouble point, consumer durables account for 7% of GDP. Sales in that sector, they have also dropped. There's the healthcare services. Typically, they account for 10% of GDP. Now, a lot of the healthcare services sector, it really stopped operating because of the risk. And now it's beginning to open up once again, but there's certainly been some issues with capacity. The other day I saw a survey which found that 71% of Americans, they're concerned about going to the doctor. They're worried that they will get sick if they go to the doctor. So the decline in healthcare service spending is going to have a significant impact on the GDP moving forward. It's essential pretty much if we anticipate we'll see a V-shaped recovery. And this equates to what will be a huge decline in consumer spending and GDP. We also must keep in mind that there has been some assistance programs that were put in place to provide support for households during this crisis. Those support programs are gone. They have helped pump up the consumer spending data, make it appear like things are stronger than they really are. But the truth is, the people in the lower income brackets, they spend more. That extra boost from unemployment insurance payments is no longer heading their way. There's already been a sharp and immediate impact on spending since this has taken place in late July. Without immediate action or more direct payments directly to consumers in the US, we're about to see the economic data take a sharp nosedive. It will get ugly. Now, I'm not advocating that we need some sort of UBI to be permanent, but what I am detailing is that the crisis is so vast that the full weight of it we've not even carried yet. Now, according to Deloitte, they said this adds up to a huge decline in consumer spending and GDP, and they said their baseline forecast shows GDP falling over 17% in the first 2 quarters of 2020. And that initial consumption shock is the beginnings of the trouble. So investment spending is expected to decline, according to Deloitte, due to the lower consumption, the continuing high level of uncertainty. They also anticipate residential construction is expected to slow as more and more consumers find themselves unemployed and newly unable to afford new houses. Even rock bottom mortgage rates will not be able to prop up housing prices if people can't find jobs. And Deloitte also suggests that exports will see a sharp drop We covered the other day that exports were approaching record lows, but the demand shock is still to begin moving through the economy, and we will begin seeing the economic activity slow down. So they added, quote, "We believe that hopes for a quick and strong rebound in the third quarter are optimistic. The speed of recovery, whatever letter-shaped recovery we experience, depends on four key factors: the medical situation, the course of the sickness itself, number two, how the impact to the economy spreads beyond the sectors that were directly affected, number three, the global impact," and they said the most important on their list would be trust, that people need to trust in these four dimensions: trust that their physical space is safe, trust that their financial concerns are being served, trust that their information is secure, and trust that their emotional and societal needs are being safeguarded. If public and private sector leaders can effectively get people to trust government and businesses, the economic recovery could take off faster, unquote. Now they concluded that the most likely shape for a recovery for the U.S. will be a U, as reflected in the baseline forecast. The economy may experience a bounce in quarter three simply from loosening restrictions, but growth will likely remain subdued for several quarters after the bottom in 2020 quarter two until this sickness is controlled. The secondary impact is over, trust is regained, and the global economy begins to improve. Now that was for the short run. Their long-term forecast, it offers much less optimism. They said our 5-year forecast horizon forces us to question, quote, "Are we really going to end up where we started?" unquote. And they said the answer is probably no. Now they said the two reasons why the economy won't simply go back to where it was, and both suggest that productivity growth and profits are likely to be slow as the economy moves back toward full employment. But number one, they said demand patterns are likely to change, particularly if fighting the sickness proves to be a long, hard trek, and sectors that require people to gather in close quarters, such as live entertainment, sports, restaurants, and travel, they're likely to struggle even if venues fully open. Consumer spending will therefore shift away from these types of spending, and spending on alternatives such as durable goods and housing may therefore grow faster than they might otherwise be expected. Savings may also increase, with even affluent consumers simply preferring not.
Heart rate's 120, BP's 140/90. Hectic first day, but earning my nursing degree on.
Not to spend, given the more limited menu of options available. And they finish by saying business practices are likely to change, and in ways that may restrain productivity gain. So key supply chains, they might need to be reshored, and businesses and government, they newly evaluate the risks of over-reliance on overseas manufacturers. So businesses may need to rethink the emphasis on just-in-time inventory systems in a world where complex supply chains have proven to be relatively fragile. So they stated that both international trade and supply chain management have contributed to productivity growth over the past few decades. They think the reversal of both of these trends will create a drag on productivity growth in the U.S., and the economy could experience a medium term of declining productivity as companies re-engineer to these less productive but safer practices. Now the other day, it was Bank of America who suggested it will cost over $1 trillion to bring all of these ex-American businesses back on shore. We know it's in fact priceless, but it could put a damper on any economic growth for decades. So Deloitte, they suggested that the recovery will likely be slower than what they're projecting. That GDP will come in at a substantially lower level than the pre-crisis trend suggested, and they assume that the baseline is still 5% below their pre-crisis forecast at the end of their 5-year outlook. Now, according to Deloitte, the worst-case scenarios are that there is no end in sight, that the attempted reopening in the middle of the second quarter will prove to be premature. The numbers will jump. States will be forced to attempt to limit the economic activity. The lack of either treatment options or anything effective, it means that the cycle of restart attempts and subsequent reclosing continues. This limits the possibility of recovery and erodes trust in institutions. By later reopenings, and then consumers prefer to stay at home in safety rather than take what they have come to believe are unwarranted risks. They expect 1 quarter of faster growth in 2020, which would be Q3. Then it would be offset by a decline in Q4 of 2020 due to fresh outbreaks in the fall. After that, growth remains relatively low, with recovery only starting hesitantly by the end of 2021. By 2025,